Okay, so today I want to thank one of our agents for the topic for today. I received this text over the weekend. Sorry to bother you. Just need a little advice. I've had two offers so far that wasn't picked. My buyer's offers are anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 over asking. Am I doing something wrong? What would you suggest? The questions of the hour, right? So what I'm going to cover today is a topic that I have covered in the past, but it's important because everybody's in a different place, and and you may not have needed it then, but you need it now. All right, and the topic is how to make your offers competitive in a highly competitive bidding war environment. Okay, so sales price, the text that I received saying $20,000 to $30,000 over asking. Why am I not getting selected? There's probably a lot of reasons why your offer may not be getting selected. And it's not just about the sales price. $20,000 to $30,000 over is sadly in this market not uncommon. Um, Depending upon the price point of the house, that may be even on the low side of what is the norm out there. Okay, so there are ways to look at it and find out what the average market conditions within the last few months have been doing, and we can talk about those. But more than likely, where you're at and why you're not getting a win in the bidding war is somewhere other than just the sales price. It's in the other terms of your offer. So let's look at some details of that, and then we'll kind of talk about the things that you can do to make your offer rise above the rest. Okay, sound like a good plan today? All right, I am going to share my screen. We're going to, you know what? Let me do something different here. Let me figure out which screen my presentation is going to show on. And then I'm going to share that screen. Bear with me for just a second, folks. Okay, y'all looking at winning the bidding war? Okay. All right, thank y'all. All right, so again, big picture, our goal here is to try to balance two things in this legal balance. One, you want to get the best possible deal for your client. And two, you want to submit an offer with the highest probability of that offer being accepted. And the key to all of this is balancing risk. Okay, one, risk of overbidding. Two, the risk of not doing enough to get your offer accepted. So it is a careful and careful balancing act that we have to walk down. And you are the voice of experience in this, and you're not always going to get it right. So what we're here to do is talk about ways to engage in all of this. Okay. So a prerequisite to employing any of the strategies that we're going to talk about is making sure that your client is fully aware of the risks of the things that you may or may not be proposing to them. So again, that risk in the previous that we looked at, it's a matter of cautioning your client about these risks and making sure that they're aware of them. And a great way to do that is to make sure that they're signing off on this document, which you could do with your buyer's brokerage agreement. You could do separate, standalone, whether or not if you're not doing a buyer's brokerage agreement, you can still get them to sign this to say that there are risks inherent in some of the strategies that we may employ, such as if you're going to buy as is, that without an inspection, there's greater risk of buying a property with defects. If a buyer's is depositing large amounts of earnest money, this money is at risk, and if you breach the contract, if a dispute arises, you may end up losing that earnest money. With the finance contingency, there's a greater risk of being in breach of contract if a buyer cannot obtain financing. So it's just these are covering your behinds, if you will. CYA is the language what we used to talk about. These can be either as exhibit, or a standalone document. They're found in Remind Docs Plus. I would strongly caution you to have your client sign off on these. And a great way to do that is just send it with the offer. That way you're covered. Okay. Any questions on this? All right. So with the full knowledge and understanding of your buyers, the most obvious way to make your offer more attractive to a seller is bid the highest net to seller, either low or very no seller paid closing costs, and your bid needs to be commensurate with what else is going on in the marketplace. Okay, and with the comparables. And if you're not doing an effective CMA and you're not looking at the market analysis of every other home in this neighborhood sold at on average 103% of the sales price, and you're offering 98% of the sales price, then the answer is pretty obvious why your offer is not getting selected. Okay. The next thing is offering the higher earnest money amount. Okay. Used to be 1% of sales price was pretty much average. Now I would say 1% of the sales price is pretty much the minimum. And if you want your offer to get serious attention, you may think about at least 2% of the sales price. Okay. And offering a very short, or with some cautions and some risks associated with this, potentially even no due diligence period. Not highly recommended, but it is a way to get through this, and we'll talk about one strategy to mitigate the risk when you're doing 0 days of due diligence. Okay, any questions on any of these? Okay, anybody know when I talk about the stats that I said in the highest net to seller, when we were talking about 98% versus 103 in the marketplace? Who knows where to go find that information? Somebody knows. Go ahead, Manuela. You're muted still.
Oh.
There you go.
To get the stats, you can go to the absorption analysis
Good morning.
for the highest amount paid and how long it takes to sell the home, or you can do a quick CMA to basically find out how much people have been paying in the past for these properties.
Absolutely. So your first answer is your CMA. Looking at the comparable homes, and if the comparables sold at 103%, doesn't make much sense to put something in at 98 or 95% of the sales price, right? Okay. So the other thing you could do is look at the absorption analysis report, which I'd be happy to show you. That's probably a whole separate training session, or something that we could take on in a coaching session. If you would like, we can talk about how to pull the absorption analysis report, which gives you the same statistics but at a much broader scale. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Other ways to make your offer more attractive. I love this. When you get a full price offer in this market, are you kidding me? That's insultingly low. All right, so you can do oftentimes a shorter closing date is going to be more desirable to a seller. If you can or cannot do that, you can express flexibility in the closing date. If not in your offer, maybe in the email where you're sending the offer to the listing agent, you could say, hey, we've put in here 30 days, but we could potentially do shorter or longer if the seller desires. And of course, anything that you do, if there is a lender involved, if you're going to shorten dates, whether they be closing dates or financing or seller or appraisal contingencies, You don't do that stuff in the vacuum. You make sure you take a partner on with your lender. Okay. Let me back up and ask one other thing. Would you? How do you know some of the information that of what the seller is looking for when you're about to put an offer in?
Ask them.
Thank you. Yes, I. Yeah, let me make sure you can see my face for this. Okay. Under no circumstances ever, um, with one exception, would I ever submit an offer without actually talking to the listing agent first. I want to talk to them. I want to pick their brain. I want to ask them questions about their seller. One of the best scripts I've ever heard and I've used for many, many years, didn't invent this one, stole it from somebody else. Tell me how I can write a winning offer for you. What is it that your seller is looking for? And if I have the ability to write that into the offer, by golly, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So I have been a listing agent and received upwards of 15 to 20 offers on a home, and maybe only 3 or 4 of them actually have physically called me to ask me those types of questions. And what I look at, I can see in the comparisons of the offers, the ones that don't call are completely out of tune with the reality of the situation, how much demand there is for that house. Okay. All right, you guys back on the slide presentation now? I can never tell with too many screens on my desktop here. Okay, so and don't automatically assume that a shorter closing date is better. There are a lot of people that are selling that are buying new construction that may have a build date that's going to put them 60 to 90 days out. You may want to do a longer closing date. Okay, or you may want to offer post closing possession to the seller. Okay, you can also offer shorter financing and appraisal contingencies, and of course you want to do this with lender approval. If you're having a hard time with this, you may ask that lender to go ahead and put your client through underwriting. I know this is something that Greg does, and will do for many of his clients, to where they're not just pre-approved, they're cleared underwriting with only the installation of an address to their contract and the appraisal contingency, and that's it. And they could do away with financing contingency altogether because they're already completely approved. Okay. The next one, the cleaner the offer, the better. So few or no special steps. There used to be a time in our industry when if we didn't have at least 3 to 5 special steps on every offer, with things like termite bonds and uh, surveys and things like that, additional things that you would typically put in an offer, then you were a bad agent if you didn't have those in there. Nowadays, if you have anything in there, you're shooting your client's offer in the foot, theoretically. Okay. So the question is if you're asking for repairs or something in the purchase and sale agreement, then what are you going to ask for when the amendment to address concern comes around? All right. Don't give them a reason to not pick your offer straight out of the gate. Your client may have a legitimate concern about something in the house, something not working, the garage door not going down, something that they want, an HVAC system that isn't working. That may be a legitimate concern. Don't diminish it. Just say that there's an appropriate time to address that, and it's during the amendment to address concerns, not in the offer, the initial offer. Okay. This is an important one. Another way to make your offer more attractive to a seller. It all has to do with what financing they may currently be using. Okay. And this was, in my opinion, this might be the case with the text that I received that generated this entire conversation today. Is I believe that one of those buyers in those offers was an FHA or VA. And those on the consideration of, financing considerations is going to be further down on the list. Okay. Um, when you're getting 10, 15 offers, there's a good chance that some of them are going to be cash or at a minimum conventional loans. And when you're doing an FHA or a VA, sadly, those are going to fall lower in the priority list for a seller. It's unfortunate. They're still viable programs, and as a veteran in the United States Air Force, I hate it that VAs don't get any more consideration than they do. They should, but there's for a reason. Why do the FHA and VA get lower consideration? There are additional bureaucratic requirements with both of those programs. One of them is the amendatory clause that says that they can get their earnest money back. The other one is things like VA has a termite requirement where the seller has to do some termite inspections, and 100% appraisal, and there's some seller paid fees with VA loans too. Okay. USDA loans and any loan with any type of down payment assistance, Georgia Dream, NACA, what's another one I heard recently, Genoa, any of those programs actually offer and involve an extra layer of underwriting and bureaucratic stuff that requires them. It takes longer and it's more bureaucracy. So of course there's more problems and potential for problems. Okay, so what happens if you have somebody that is a FHA or a VA loan? What can you do for somebody like that?
Get them to maybe work with Ribbon for a cash offer.
Yeah. A lot of times they may qualify just fine for conventional, but they may have chosen FHA or VA because of either the down payment is lower or the interest rate is lower. Okay, so they may have actually made a conscious choice to pursue those programs when they may qualify for a conventional. So if you're losing the battle when you've got an FHA, you may want to consider having them, you know what, take one for the team. Yeah, you might pay 0.5% more in terms of interest rate for conventional versus FHA, but you can always refi it later using an FHA refi or a VA refi. Okay. If it gets you into the house on the initial go, then it may be a worthwhile effort. Alternately, you're absolutely right, Manuela. You can suggest that they pursue the possibility of working with either Ribbon or Knock, in which case they could change that from an FHA to VA, which would put them in third and fourth priority to potentially first. Okay. Any questions on that? It's pretty important. All right. With the financing contingency, make sure that you're taking a very close look at the pre-approval letter. Maybe they want to do a higher down payment because that implies that the buyer is more financially secure and there's less risk to the seller in those situations. The other thing is if you're submitting a pre-approval from Wells Fargo, Bank of America, any big mega bank, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage, some of those, the online servicers generally do not have as good of a reputation as a local lender. So try to avoid mega banks or out-of-state lenders. Try to encourage your client to do something with a smaller local lender, someone that the listing agent might actually recognize, like Greg Janicki and others. Okay. Other ways to make your offer more attractive is the use of an escalation clause. This one kind of helps you to make sure that nobody is beating you up to a certain cap, but also at the same time that you're not overpaying when you could have gotten it for $10,000 less. You don't want to overpay. So an escalation clause is something that you can add to an offer that says, in the event of multiple offer, buyer agrees to increase their purchase price by more than, usually that's $1,000 net to seller, over any other offer presented to the seller with comparable terms and conditions, so long as the offer is in an arm's length transaction and presented it on the buyer before the offer deadline date. In no event shall the buyer pay more than a cap of X. Okay, so the home was listed for 250. Your client will do an escalation clause up to 270. So if the next best offer comes in at 260 and you do $1,000 over, your buyer's on the hook for 261. Make sense? And this one does take terms into consideration that says comparable terms and conditions mean that the seller have similar financing contingencies, those kind of things, and you do have to present the comparable offer to show that you're not just bluffing. Okay. The biggest concern with an escalation clause that the home still has to appraise. So there may need to be some appraisal gap coverage, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of this. Okay, and here we are. If a buyer's cash position will allow it, consider offering appraisal gap coverage. This is a clause that is within your Remind Docs Plus, and it basically says that in the event the property does not appraise for at least the purchase price, buyer agrees to pay seller at a closing the difference between the sales price and the appraised value, and you can do that up to a cap of X dollars. Okay. Does everybody understand what the appraisal gap coverage does? Any discussion or questions on that one? All right. There are lots of other ways to make your offer more attractive to a seller. There's an entire library of special stipulations available for sellers market on the C21 clause library. There's some great ones in here. Some of the ones we've already talked about, the escalation clause, the escalation clause is in here. The appraisal gap coverage, there's two different ones for the appraisal gap coverage. You can do property not appraising, not a basis for the buyer getting their earnest money back. You can do, where's the one that Mike loves? You can do staged earnest money. I like this one. Buyer agrees not to purchase another property. So a lot of people in this marketplace, buyer's agents are writing 2 and 3 offers in a weekend and hoping that one of them gets accepted. If you're serious about it and your client is only putting that one property, putting an offer in for that one property, lay claim to it. State it right there. This is the only one we're putting an offer in, and we're serious about this. Okay. The one that Mike likes, and I don't have it on the screen, but it's in here if you ever go to find this, is you can offer basically a seller's contingency where they can cancel the contract, which is something that we don't have right now. You know what? Why not? It's a pretty sweet deal. All right. If you happen to present, if you want to present an offer that is strong, you can also, when you do 0 days of due diligence, instead of completely giving up on due diligence and the right, you can offer with the property sold with a right to request repairs. Okay. So what this does is it removes the buyer's right to terminate the contract for no particular reason. And it only basically makes it possible for them to terminate the contract only if they can't come to terms on the repairs that need to be done to the house. Okay. So due diligence period, a buyer can cancel the contract for any reason at all or for no reason at all. This just takes it from no reason at all to a very significant reason as a problem with the repairs within the house, and we can't come to an agreement on them. Make sense? Strongly suggest you take a look at this, read this, and understand exactly what it is, because it actually limits it to certain defects found in the home, and those are outlined right there. What's my, okay. So here is another thing that you can do. And y'all are putting chats in here. Stock ribbon. Sorry, I was looking at this at the chats and I hadn't noticed them until just now. The other thing that you can do, everybody is very familiar with this section of the purchase and sale agreement, because right there's your due diligence period. But almost nobody ever uses this number 2 down below, which is basically, in consideration of the seller granting the buyer an option to terminate this agreement, buyer shall pay seller additional option money of $500 via check or wire transfer within 3 days. And if you check the shall not be applied towards the purchase price, this is, as one one closing attorney that I worked closely with in the past, he said, this is the closest thing you can get to a 100% legal bribe. And what this says is basically, accept our offer and I'll stroke you a check for $500 just for the privilege of accepting my offer and giving me a due diligence period. Pretty simple, right? So if I've got 2 other offers that are perfectly compatible with each other, and one of them's offering me $500 or $1,000 additional today, when I accept that offer, and there's no real skin off of my nose for either one, which one would most people choose? The one that's going to pay them $500 and $1,000 or $1,000. Okay. And in the big scheme of things, for a buyer, is $500 or $1,000, you know, in the big scheme of a $500,000 house, going to make a big difference? Not even close. All right. Some more advanced techniques. I don't know that these are advanced. These are becoming more commonplace all the time. A personal appeal letter to the seller saying who they are, what they are. Again, the goal here is to try to make a personal connection with the people, with the sellers of the house. Even better than a letter is a video message from the buyers to the sellers, telling them what they love about their home. Basically try to appeal to their heartstrings about, you know, I can visualize seeing my grandkids playing in that backyard, et cetera, et cetera. A video can make a huge difference. All right. Also, if the condition of the home warrants this, you might want to consider an offer to purchase the home as is. In other words, state in your purchase and sale that there will be no repairs to be requested. Again, very risky. Don't know that I would recommend it in most situations, but say, for example, the house is new construction or was built 2 years ago, pretty good chance that there's nothing major going on there. So this might be a more acceptable risk versus reward portion of the offer. Lots of good information there. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. Here's what I offer for you. If you are drafting an offer, you would like to have somebody just take a look at it and look for opportunities to insert one of these or some feedback on whether or not your offer makes sense, or is there anything else that I can do? That's what I'm here for. Shoot me a text, schedule a coaching session, you know, and we'll do it during that, whatever makes the most sense for you guys. All right. What questions do you have, everybody? All right. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's do it again on Thursday. Anybody have any burning topics, any major concerns or anything that you want me to cover on Thursday? I'm open to hear it. Otherwise, I'll figure out something for y'all. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.